Hello. In all the years I've been doing YouTube now, I've very rarely just stopped to actually chat to my viewers. And usually I'll be here in the workshop or downstairs in the studio, working on equipment or demonstrating formats or some unusual piece of audio and video technology. But I actually run a business transferring people's tapes to USB sticks or hard disk or uploads, and I run a whole range of different video formats and all kinds of interesting things, which is why this channel exists. But very occasionally, something will happen that really gets to me in the business. And I've had a few cases where some customers have upset me. I've been running the business for something full-time, for something like 15, 16 years now. So over those years, I've had, 3 customers come to mind where they've properly upset me. And one was quite recently, so that prompted me to maybe do a quick video where I'll chat with you and explain a little bit about some of the things that have managed to upset me. So the 3 customers that properly managed to upset me, I'm going to call them Tom, Dick and Harriet. And let me just briefly go through what they did, and you tell me, is it me? So Tom is the one who used the phrase paying in good faith. And interestingly enough, I've had another customer in the last couple of weeks also use that phrase. So Tom sent a number of Video 8 tapes to me. And I've covered this subject before. The trouble with these tapes is they use a very fine tape inside them. And if they've been badly treated, being stored in a loft or a garage or a shed, then mould will build up on the tape, which is true of all videotapes. But the tape is so fine in here that it glues the tape together and causes them to snap. So I've developed a process on some equipment back there which helps me to demould those tapes. It's not a very pleasant job, I have face masks and air extraction to try to take the particulates of the mould away. It's really not very pleasant. It's very time consuming. It's a skill I've learned over some years, and there's very few businesses who will take on mouldy tapes like that. So in this particular case, he'd sent a number of tapes to me. I think it's about 5 or 6 that were mouldy and had snapped, and he couldn't get them transferred anywhere else. And some contained sensitive material, so he was quite adamant he didn't want any material uploaded. Now the reason I mention that is very often what I'll do for a customer who has a small quantity of tapes is I'll generate 2 file types, small files and large files, basically MPEG-4s and large DVAVI files typically. And what I'll often do is once payment's in, I'll upload the MPEG-4 files via WeTransfer.com. Customer can see them, say, yep, happy with that, and then I'll send the tapes and USB stick together. Just saves a bit of time in post. But in this particular case, the customer didn't want that. He wanted it all put on the USB stick and that sent, which is fine, understood. So I demolded the tapes, it's time consuming, and transferred them all to video files on a USB stick and gave him the bill, which was very much in the order of what I'd quoted the typical sort of cost for doing those demolds and transfers. There's not any sort of bill shock there. But the customer paid part of the bill, and I just waited a little bit, and then he said a few weeks later, well, I've paid part of the bill, that's payment in good faith, could you please send the USB stick and tapes urgently? Now, is it just me, or is there something wrong with that? Would you buy your food from Tesco, order it, get the bill, and then say, well, I'll pay part of it, and then you send it, and then when I've tasted the tomatoes, I'll then send you the rest? Not sure if that works. So the interesting thing was that another customer used the same phrase recently as well. That in that case it was a different format, it was V2000, and also part paid, or wanted a part pay, and pay the rest when the work was completed. And it just seems an odd thing to do. The V2000 person, I overcame his fears. I uploaded one of the MPEG-4 files and he was able to see it, and he realised I'd done a good job, paid the rest, got it all, and was very, very happy, actually delighted. But back to Tom. So Tom had paid part of the bill. It covered the cost of the demolding. He hadn't paid the cost for the transfers to the USB stick, or the USB stick itself, or the post. So I was down on it. And I said I wasn't happy with this arrangement. I'd made it clear that I wanted the payment in advance, but if money was a problem, I could do some things to try to cut the cost. And I'd again offered, well, look, I can encrypt the files. I could send the MPEG-4 files in advance via WeTransfer.com. We can maybe use a smaller USB stick that way. There's things I can do to reduce the postage cost. I can try to get the costs down for you. No. He was very unhappy. In fact, it became a little bit abusive. He said, well, forget the transfers. He won't take the video files, so he doesn't have to pay for them. I have done that work, but now he decided if he doesn't take the files that I've created, he doesn't have to pay for them. Not sure that's fair. And at which point he started saying things like, well, I'm holding his tapes hostage because I'm not returning his tapes. He said, just send me the tapes back. Now, I really was trying very hard to make the customer happy. And this was making the whole family sad, literally. We were all suffering from sleepless nights. Even the children were upset by this. So in the end, I decided, look, I just don't want this anymore. Maybe I'm just a soft touch. So I said to him, look, if you've got access to any kind of computer that's got a DVD-ROM drive, what I can do is I can put the MPEG-4 files on DVD-ROM, so at least you've got those. And then later you can have the DVI files later if you want. We'll put them on a USB stick and pay for them and you can have them. But he was really quite adamant now. Don't bother sending the MPEG-4 files. They'll throw them in the bin anyway. Just send me my tapes back. So I sent the tapes with the DVD-ROMs anyway. Maybe I'm just a soft touch. Actually, it got worse. Because that had thrown my normal system, I'd accidentally left the USB stick in the package. So he now got everything, even though he hadn't paid for it. And when he eventually looked at the work I'd done, he realised, oh, it was well worth it. And he apologised for the stress he put us under and promised to pay the outstanding balance. I've not received it yet, but maybe I will. What do you think? So that was Tom. Didn't pay the whole bill. Maybe I'm just soft, but when you're self-employed and things go wrong, it affects you, and I don't like that feeling. Okay, let's go to Dick. Now, Dick was a customer who'd sent one tape in advance for me to do, to make sure he was happy with the quality. So he'd sent a tape, and I had transferred that for him, and he paid for that, and I uploaded the MPEG-4 file for him to make sure he was happy, and very happy, excellent. That's the way I want it. Okay. He then sent a large batch of tapes, which, this was some months later, actually included the first tape, and I hadn't realised that he actually resent the first tape. So this was, like I say, some months later, and I ran all of the tapes to MPEG-4 and DVI files as I normally do. Now, here's the thing about video capture. When you put the tape in the machine, whichever machine you use, it will shuffle a little bit, and when you press play, it'll start up. The servos take a few seconds to get going, maybe just a second to get into synchronization. The video capture takes little time. So when you look at professional videotapes, they always have a good run at the start where they'll have just colour bars, test card, or some non-important material at the start, so that you get past the tape dropouts, your servo settled, your equipment gets settled, any video capture system or any recording process that you may have is all settled before you get to the main content. So you could never really be sure that the first, what should we say, 2 or 3 seconds of tape will be captured successfully on any given run. Dick got a little bit upset because he found that when I reran that first tape, I had captured maybe, I don't know how long, a second or so less than on that very first occasion. And it can be for all the reasons I've just said. I would have been possibly using a different machine, a different capture system. There would have been differences throughout. There could have been dropouts. For whatever reason, the first, say, 1 second was not available in that new capture. And he felt that that meant I hadn't proven that I'd got the first second of every single one of his tapes. And as far as he was concerned, he shouldn't have to pay. And he had already paid, actually. And he said, I want a full refund. And I'll delete the files you've sent me, he said. He wasn't unhappy with the quality, but he wanted a full refund. Now, it has to be said I had made an error. Well, no, there was a problem. That's not to say it was my fault, actually. I'd also generated these MPEG-4 files, and I used some particular software for that. And on this particular occasion, for some reason, some of the files on one of the machines that I've been using to do the transfer, the file conversion, some of the files had its own logo on the end, which it does if you haven't paid for that software. I have paid for the software, but for whatever reason, there was a licensing issue with that software, and it didn't get rid of the couple of seconds at the end where it says the conversion was done by this software. Never quite understood why that was, actually. I went back to the software people and we ended up refreshing some licensing, and it's fine now. But for whatever reason on that occasion, some of the files had the watermark, but only in the last second. It wasn't over the video file, it was just this little sort of caption at the end. And I said, okay, don't worry about that, I'll fix it for you. And so, I can upload the files or send me the hard disk back and I'll provide you with fresh files generated with the new licenses. We can sort that. But as far as he was concerned, no. He wanted a full refund on the whole job. Well, I know there was a problem and I hadn't spotted it, but you wouldn't tend to spot that, would you? It was a licensing issue with the software. I wasn't going to spot that. But that didn't mean that the work was not of high quality, and all the video captures, the DV/AVI files were all good. Yes, we know you can't necessarily guarantee you're going to catch the first second. That's the fact of life with videotapes. So what did I do with this particular customer? He said he wanted a full refund or he'll take me to small claims court or something. Well, the amount of MPEG-4 files was such that I couldn't even fit them on a USB stick. So what I did, I put them on a 500GB hard disk, which I paid for, put the new MPEG-4 files on there, and posted them to him. And I never had another peep from him. So, shall we assume that he was happy in the end? He realised that what he was asking for was unreasonable? That was something like 2 years ago, I think. Maybe even longer. So, I think if he was going to take me to the small claims court, he would have done that by now. And any small claims court, they would have said you're being unreasonable. I'm sure they would. Anybody would have said that was unreasonable. So I did my best to make the customer happy, even to the point that it cost me money. Okay, that was Tom, Dick. Let's do Harriet. Harriet was a very long time ago, in the days when I used to transfer material to DVDs, before video files were really common. Now, I've been running video files for over 10 years, so this was a long time ago. But this particular customer had requested some tapes, video 8 tapes I think they were, not a huge amount, handful of tapes to be transferred to DVDs, which I'd done. And the bill was in the order of what I'd quoted. And it was just before Christmas, so they were wanted as a Christmas gift, I believe. And time was ticking on. We were getting towards the time for Christmas post, so I emailed the customer and said, look, here's the bill. I was only around about £50-60. Hurry up if you want to get them for Christmas. And Harriet said, I've run out of money. Just send me the tapes back, please. Now, what did Harriet expect me to do there? I'm going to pay for the post, I'm going to throw away the DVDs, and I'm going to lose all the time. So I said, look, that's not reasonable. And I worked with her. I said, look, come on, maybe I can do something to reduce the cost a bit. So I actually did her a discount. Nope. Never paid. Never even replied to my emails. No response at all. I've still got the tapes and the DVDs. Must be 10, 12 years later, Still, I can't bring myself to throw them away. I don't know what I should do. What would you do? Throw them in a bin? So, what can you do in a case like that? Am I holding the tapes hostage by not sending them when I was never paid for the work? Is that unreasonable? If you sent tapes, remember back in the days where film processing was a thing, if you sent your films to be processed and then never paid for the processing and printing or what have you, and didn't even pay to have them returned, would you expect them to be sent back to you? Well, I'm still sitting on them. Now, that was Tom, Dick and Harriet. They're some of the customers that properly upset me. But, there have been odd occasions over the years where little things have happened, some of which were mildly amusing, I suppose, and some of which were just bad luck. So let me do a few mentions. There was a customer where I had quoted for video files and also the optional extra of DVDs. This was in the days where you could sort of do both, so I'm guessing probably about 8-9 years ago. And gave them the bill. This is video files on a hard disk, I think it was, and these are the DVDs. And the customer said, actually, I've run out of money. I'll just take the optional extra DVDs. It's like going to the shop and saying, oh, you know that buy one, get one free? Can I just have the free one, please? So, clearly, it cost more, right, to just do the DVDs than it would have to transfer the files to computer and then add the DVDs later. So I was a little bit, I tried to explain to the customer, no, that was the optional extra. That's clearly discounted, heavily discounted, because I've already transferred the files to the computer. The customer wasn't that happy, but we came to an arrangement, and all the work I'd put into the video files, and I just lost it. So I ended up doing the DVDs in a way that was, how can I describe this? At that time, I would have done the DVDs straight to a DVD recorder, but because I had extracted them to computer first, I did the DVDs on computer, which is actually nicer. They've got better menus. All that extra work that gone into that was lost. So I just took the hit. Oh well. I had another customer. This was a small business. It was a film company, and they'd had me work on some HDV tapes, high definition videotapes, and strangely, they actually wanted them on DVD, which is a strange thing to want for high definition tapes. They wanted them on DVD with time codes displayed on screen, burnt on screen. And I was able to do that, and they paid for that work and then sent some more tapes and then went bust. So I never got paid for the second batch of tapes. Fortunately, the payment I got for the first batch of tapes was enough to at least pay for the high definition player which I'd bought just for their job. So that went quite badly. But companies go bust. I don't really think that's malicious. So, don't lose too much sleep over things like that, which is just part of the cost of doing business, that you get some bad checks. I've had that occasionally where checks have bounced, or a company will go bust or some other reason that I don't get proper payment. So it's part of the cost of doing business. It's a small percentage. Take it on the chin. Don't take it too personally. I've had some interesting requests over the years, and one going back again to the DVD days, a customer sent me a pile of tapes, and I said, well, they're not numbered or dated, so I'll just have to put them on DVD as they come. And the customer says, oh, that's not very good. You should be able to work out what the age of the tapes were by how old the children are. So I'm supposed to examine all the tapes, work out the ages of however many children they've got, and work out what sequence they should be recorded in on DVD. That's a reasonable request, isn't it? I had another case. This was extremely odd. I had a case of some Betamax tapes sent to me, and this again was in the DVD days. In fact, it's going back a long time now. There must be something like 14 years ago. And the customer wanted the tapes transferred in their entirety to DVDs. The tapes were mostly about I'm not going to mention any names, but the tapes were about a serial killer in the UK from a long time ago. And you can guess which serial killer it is if you want. I don't care. I'm not going to say which one it was, and it doesn't matter. But the customer didn't just want the material itself about the serial killer programs, but all the adverts and everything else between it, to the point that the tapes were very long and ended up going on 2 or 3 DVDs each. But he wanted everything. And I wasn't sure why that would be, but all the adverts and everything were very important to him. Now, he knew what was on the tapes because I'd actually provided a service kit for his Betamax video recorder. It's a Sanyo VTC 5000, I think, and I had some of those kits in stock at the time. So I'd provided the kit and he'd installed it, and I think he'd got into a bit of a kerfuffle with it. So he I think got the machine sort of semi-working, but sent the tapes to me for transfer to DVDs. So, okay, well, here's the bill, but it's significant because, it's a lot of DVDs, it's a lot of hours. And he didn't pay. And I kept asking for payment, and I was getting absolutely nowhere. Eventually, I got a phone call. In fact, my wife took the phone call. And they said, oh, really sorry about this. I understand you've been trying to contact such and such. Yes. Well, it may not be obvious, but the person in question is in a mental institution, and he's had a habit of running up bills with businesses. He hasn't got any means. So the person in the mental institution had a thing about this serial killer and had got so used to watching the tapes that he didn't just want the programs. He wanted all the adverts and bits and pieces in between because it was the whole sequence. He was watching the whole sequence was important to him. The whole, I don't know what you can call it, the whole experience of watching those tapes included everything else. And the bill was significant. I mean, it was hundreds. And they said, well, he doesn't have any means. Well, of course, our attitude was, you're giving him access to a phone, you're giving him access to the necessary ways to communicate, and I can't remember now whether it was done by phone or email, it was that long ago. It might have been phone. So you're letting him communicate with businesses and run up these bills, but you're not, keeping that under control. So they agreed to pay some of the bill. I think we cut it in about half. So I lost a lot of money and a lot of time for that. And indeed, he got his DVDs of his serial killer. So this does raise a question about mental health, doesn't it? That maybe 1 or 2 of these customers have had slight mental health issues. Maybe the one about every second counts, Dick. Maybe he wasn't just being a bit of a dick. Maybe he had OCD, and that's why, that first second mattered to him. It was more than is reasonable. And it's not fair to be too critical because people have mental health issues, So it gets to me when things go wrong like this, but people have their own challenges. And Tom did say to me he had been under a great deal of stress recently. Some things had happened in his life, and that had made him perhaps not handle things the way that you would. So I can understand that. I do understand that, right? Mental health is a challenge for people. Now, when I mentioned that I was going to do this, I had one of my friends who has contributed a few things to this channel before, and he works in the same business as me, had a situation he had to mention where he had done authoring to Blu-ray, not something that I've ever done personally, and I think it was Cinefilm he'd done in high definition on Blu-ray discs. And it's a lengthy process. The whole authoring process takes time on Blu-ray. So creating the video files, he was putting captions in, and then authoring on Blu-rays and printing the Blu-rays he's got a beautiful printer for printing on discs. And this particular customer had said, "Oh, love the work and everything, but I realised that I got the house number wrong. I'm one digit out on the house number that I'd asked you to put in the titles. So could you just fix that for me, please?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I can, but it's going to cost. It's going to cost him to recompile the videos, re-author the Blu-rays, provide the cost of the Blu-ray discs, and print them with his beautiful printer, and put them in boxes and all that. So the cost is significant," and he gave him the bill. "Well, that's a bit much. I'm only asking you to alter one digit. Why does it cost so much money?" It's not just the ordering by age of children that can be an unrealistic expectation. There can be other things. People can request, okay, you can have your own opinion about this, but people have said, "Can I have my standard definition upscaled to high definition, please?" And they believe that, if you've got some sort of low quality VHS tape or something, that it can be somehow magically improved to high definition. If the data isn't there, if the information isn't there, there's this whole thing that came about in some film was zoom and enhance. You can somehow enhance video and make it better than it was when it's recorded. Well, no, you can't. And some of my competitors do HD upscaling and deinterlacing and things. I provide the video files in their original form. If you want to mess about with them in the digital domain on your computer later, you can do that. But I don't upscale or deinterlace because I think there's a risk of making things worse. And it can be subjective. Some people might prefer the hazard of getting some digital artifacts because they prefer the extra sharpness, and other customers will say, "Oh, I don't like that, I'd rather have the original." So it's best to keep it original in my book, and upscaling and stuff you can do the computer later. But some customers think that they can have better than original results. Well, zoom and enhance is science fiction, so no. Another common misunderstanding is that if it's on DVD, it's got to be good. So people ask that I extract data from DVDs that have been recorded by somebody else or by themselves. So they might have had a VHS to DVD recorder and copied from VHS to DVD or Video 8 to DVD. And then, can I please extract the video files from DVD? And it is technically possible, and I do it. And I've done a YouTube video about it. But there are some very real hazards. DVDs are encoded in MPEG-2, and that can be okay actually if, for example, you record 1 hour on a single layer DVD, get 4.5 gigabytes or something for a 1 hour recording. It's not incredible quality, but it's perfectly acceptable. However, if you didn't know what you were doing with your DVD recorder and it's been misconfigured and you've got 3 hours or 4 hours on a single layer DVD, it's compressed as anything. And you're never going to get the picture quality back. It's gone. then other defects, such as maybe noise at the bottom of the screen, you might be able to trim that out, or colour slip, or other defects you've got in there, are virtually unrecoverable. You can't do any kind of editing to fix things once it's compressed in MPEG 2. So it's not great extracting from DVDs at the best of times, but it can get much worse if the DVDs are in less than perfect condition, either because of scratches or because of the die starting to fail on the DVD. So you can have failure of DVDs in many ways, and the result can be that not only the picture suffers, but something that happens very commonly, and I have covered this, is you get lip sync errors. The picture and sound start to drift apart, and it's a right pain to try to glue that all back together again. So extracting from DVD is it's not an unrealistic expectation, but you have to understand it isn't necessarily going to be great. This is an unrealistic expectation. If you have something recorded and it's got a burnt-in display, so you have the time and date recorded permanently, or it was a professional tape where you've got the time coding on display, no, you can't remove that. It's burnt in. It's burnt into the video image. So when you get a recording, it's going to stay there. And I've had more than once customers say to me, "Oh, can you just remove that?" What? And get the video information from behind that burnt-in display? No, you can't. Okay? No, that's science fiction. Burnt-in display is going to stay there. You could do things like fuzz it out or expand the image at reduction of resolution, but fundamentally you can't get rid of that burnt-in display. Of course not. And, oh yes, one last unrealistic expectation was, again, with my friend who does cine films. Somebody was very unhappy with his work because Great Aunt Ethel wasn't on the cine film. And he said, well, I've done all the material. What's your understanding of what's wrong? Well, she obviously wasn't on the films. So why is it his fault? Why is he somehow, he's the bringer of bad news that Great Aunt Ethel wasn't recorded on those cine films? Well, it's not his fault, and it's not my fault if the recordings you got don't contain the material you hoped for. I did have a case of a wedding tape where I was asked to edit out the groom, which I did to the best of my ability. Finishing off with these stories, I've got the story of two Johns, and this is just proof that sometimes I get it wrong. We're only human. I had two fairly similar jobs in, both from repeat customers, both called John, and both transferred to hard disks, portable hard disks, and unfortunately I got the disks muddled up. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So I did put the correct data on each disk for each customer, so the disks that the customers received did include their data, but they weren't their hard disks. One was a relatively cheap 750 gigabyte drive, and the other one was a rather expensive 1 terabyte SSD, and they got each other's disks. But actually, both customers were brilliant, so helpful. They both special delivered back the incorrect ones, and I was able to get the files on the right disks, the correct files on the correct disks, and get them sent out by special delivery. And it's great, that when I get it wrong, sometimes people can be so helpful, take the stress off me, because I was quite stressed by that. I'd messed up. We're human beings, and sometimes you get it wrong. So on that particular day, I messed up with the two Johns. All right, a few little things since we are getting the opportunity to talk to you. I wanted to mention, is it Patron or Patreon? Do you know? It's written Patreon. So are people who are active, are they patrons or Patreons? I only have maybe, I think, about 7 or 8 Patreons. They contribute varying amounts of money, some quite small, some a little bit more. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to those. They're anonymous. I don't necessarily want to put their names on the screen, but if you like what I do and would like to contribute even a small amount, it's really appreciated. And the patrons do get to see nearly all of my YouTube videos at least a day early, sometimes up to a week or more early, and occasionally get to see some special content as well that I do just for them. Even though I've only got a small amount, I have done the odd patron only video. So do perhaps consider joining them. I am actually a patron of another channel, the DCC Museum. I contribute to them and have done for some time. So it's a nice thing if you can, but I understand lots of people just can't do that. There have actually not been any video recorders in this YouTube video. Isn't that weird?
Special delivery.
It's a Philips N1702. I don't think I've seen this exact model before. I've had Philips N1700s. This is the N1702. It's got a 4-digit tape counter and I think some other detail changes. So we can have some fun working on that. Let's have a quick look at the heads. Well, the head tips appear to be present and correct, so there's a fighting chance of getting this going if they're not completely worn out. So we can have some fun playing with this video recorder later. Oh look, it all looks very original. You can kind of tell the wear on these things by how much wear there is on this, and it doesn't look very high mileage at all. Just looking at those heads under the microscope, they actually appear to be intact, if a little dirty. So we'll give them a quick clean and see what they look like. Okay, what you're seeing there is some contamination on the top face of the head chip, but the front face, which is the actual video head chip, looks fine on both of them. Yep, those heads look intact.
Special delivery.
Oh, thank you, Max. Another one. This will be a Funai branded. I don't think I've seen one of the Funai branded Technicolor CVC machines. So that's an unusual bit of branding. Seems to come with some drive belts. There's a note here, sometime in 90 something, and I can't read it. RW Probs, I think it might say, and I just can't read that. So this must be an NTSC, I think. It's an NTSC version of the CVC machine, which is good because I'm struggling a little bit with CVC for NTSC. My machine's a little bit tired. That looks really nice. And I've seen this branding here before as well. Months, is it? No battery in there because that would have just added weight, and of course the batteries never work anyway. Oh good, so that's another little project. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what's been quite an unusual video for me. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.